if we want to stop having marriages that have to learn all this 20 years in when they're ready to get divorced, like what if we taught people this in singleness?
Patrice's playlist, well, it's good listening.
Listen, this conversation was so extraordinary. It is honestly one of my all-time favorite conversations that I've had on this podcast to date. I know that's a big claim, but when you get to the other side of this conversation, I think you're going to know why I say that. This conversation with our new friend, Bridgett Blood, who is a sexual story coach. She goes into explaining what that means, what that looks like, gives us context to that, and why that work is so important, especially for those of us that are in faith circles, have a sexual ethic, but also are really attuned to our own desire. And how does that play out? And where do we find healing? And all these other beautiful questions. I was going to end this particular season of Patrice's playlist, and our theme has been heal, move, and dream. I was going to end it with the previous conversation, and maybe share some like closing thoughts. But I came across Bridgett's work just a few weeks before actually being able to schedule some time with her. When I saw the work that she does, I was like, I need her on the podcast today, ASAP, Rocky. And it worked out. Our schedules worked out, and we're able to have this very important and healing conversation. A little bit about our new friend Bridgett, who, again, at the end of this conversation, I'm trying so hard not to fangirl, because finding someone that speaks the language of my heart and has been doing, and in many ways pioneering, even before I was into somatic work, body oriented, honoring the body in our faith, in our spiritual practices. Before I was really doing any of that, she was already making moves in this space. And it's so refreshing to find someone that is, y'all, I love her. So here's a little bit of a background on Bridgett. So as I said before, she's a sexual story coach, and she shares more about what that fully means in the context of that. She is a speaker and a host of Recover Your Life podcast. She helps Christian singles, dating, and engaged couples engage their sexual desire in a way that aligns with their values and cultivates deep self-trust, proving you can live a life, I love this, that's both hot and holy. When she's not coaching, you'll find her sipping a decaf coconut milk latte, buying more books than she could ever possibly read, or laughing at a joke she hasn't even finished telling. What you get to witness in this conversation is the beginning, I believe, of a really beautiful friendship and collaboration between two people, but also for me, with someone I greatly admire. And she's full of such wisdom, has such beautiful language around some of the sensitive topics that we touch on and talk about in this conversation. As always, I will meet you on the other end of this conversation to give you a takeaway that I am just holding and thinking about. So strap in, buckle up, get something really cozy, maybe to drink. You will probably want to take a couple of notes, but I think overall this conversation is going to be incredibly healing for you, and I'm so excited to share it. So here is my conversation with Bridgett Blood. Okay, but for real though, Bridgett, can you just give me some real proof that there are still good, healthy, emotionally mature dudes out there? Because word on the street is, and from all the memes that I'm seeing this week and honestly, the last few months on the socials, the girls out there are losing hope. And I find there are more women a lot of times on social media than there are men often. And I'm seeing a lot of that dialogue. But yeah, what's been your experience with men? And we're going to get into your story. We're going to get into your
Mhm.
background and all of that. I love that you are a sexual story coach.
Yeah.
And this excites me to no end. I'll share a little bit more of my background, why that excites me. But
Mm,
as I was sitting and just kind of preparing for this conversation, I love to kind of see what bubbles up naturally in my spirit and in my body,
yeah.
just kind of
That's so good.
what's present. And just a few days back, I had a really weird interaction with a guy in the
Okay.
church, and and it wasn't like it was just a miscommunication of some sort
Yeah, for
that's
sure.
still in process. But I was like, what that incident can make me do or is
Yes.
tempting me to do at times is just to say, see, these guys are weird.
Yeah.
There's these guys say they're doing the work, but they're not doing the work. And so,
Mm,
Bridgett, I'm really curious because you work with men and women.
hmm
What are you sensing from men that are coming to you, whether it's in your friendship circles, clients, folks that you're
mm,
mentoring? What are
yeah.
you sensing with the men that are
Mm.
spiritually minded, but also wanting to do some of their work? What are you seeing in real time right now?
Oh, for sure. I think men are just as heartbroken as we are. Um,
Mm.
and I think we've really been indoctrinated to dehumanize men. And I think one of the things of, I have conversations with women where I'm like, hey, when you're willing to participate in a dating experience,
Mm.
um, that is less than you deserve, you actually are contributing to a cultural narrative that this is all men are. And so we have to take ownership as women to say, actually, God made men to be able to connect to their hearts, to know their values, to honor sexuality. Like that is not a
Mm.
female thing. That is a
Mm.
divinely designed thing. And I have men on the other side that are like, oh my gosh, I'm so desperate for a woman who will step into her story with me. And I'm like, yes, I know that. So it's really not about gender. I think that from a evangelical Christian worldview lens, we've been taught men. I mean, what I typically say is if we were to unfilter it, what we've been taught um, contextually within our Christian subculture is that
Hmm.
men are emotional robots who have to have sex.
Yes,
That's it. That's all they are.
absolutely.
That's the sum of who they are. There are
Yep.
no dreams, there are no goals, there is
Yep.
no beauty, there is no heart connect. Like that is it.
That's
And
right.
I'm just like, wow, like in a culture that is designed to honor men, I'm like, that's the most dishonoring thing that you could possibly say about human beings,
Wow.
about men.
Mm.
And so that's what I'm seeing is I get it. Like I hear, I mean, I'm on my own dating journey too. Like I get that of like, how do I hold all the things and what happens and all of that. But I actually have to come to the fact of like, wait a second, like my view of men has to match God's view of men if I'm going to participate
Ooh.
in a healing story for both of us.
Ooh. I felt that my view of men
Mm-hmm.
needs to match God's view of men.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say more on that, please?
Yeah. I'm actually reminded so part of my story. I grew up in a very conservative. Well, I actually didn't grow up in church. I was the first Christian in my family at 13. Had a divine encounter with God on my bathroom floor at 13 years old. And then my family came to faith after me, so kind of was flip flopped. But I grew up in a church context in high school that like men and women shouldn't even be friends on Facebook because that
100%.
could lead to an affair. Like that level of intensity around fear of male female friendships. So I literally
Wow.
had no idea how to have healthy relationships with men. Um, I was terrified all the time. I was like, oh, my body is a threat. I'm trying to figure out this like situationship in high school, this guy that I like, but I don't know. And there's just it's all this confusing stuff. And so when I got to college, I share this story. It's one of my favorite stories. I went to a virtual if gathering, and I'm familiar with those. And so one of the prayer reflection times, I kind of like laid on the floor with the Lord. And clear as day, I hear the Lord say, hey, I'd like you to work on your RBF. And I was like, how do you know what that is? And he's like, yeah, he's like, you've used purity as a weapon against men instead of as an invitation into holiness. And that's not what I created sexuality for. And I'm like,
Bridget.
E- But I'm over here following all the rules and you have a problem with that? He's like, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with the heart behind the way that you're pursuing purity. And so I'm like, okay, well, this really messes up. What are you supposed to do with that when the Lord's like, hey, you're doing purity wrong
Listen.
in the kindest way possible, in the kindest way
Yeah.
possible. And so the Lord just really began to bring really beautiful platonic friendships into my life in
Mm.
college. I actually didn't start dating until after I was out of college,
Mhm.
um, which I'm not saying I recommend. It was just part of my story and made
Yeah.
sense in my trauma history and all of that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. I just needed to get safe with men first. I was like,
Oof.
we'll figure out dating after. Like, let's just get safe with men first. But it really was a confrontation of like men experiencing pain with me too, just because of the harshness that I carried and the like they were all self-protection and I have so much compassion. And when I sit with good and safe men, like they're like, well, of course you would behave that way toward like, there's no judgment when I'm with good and
Mm.
safe men, there's no judgment towards that. But I do also
Mm.
have to honor that there was pain that they experienced with me too, because of my reaction to the way that I experience men as a whole. And so there's kind of been a long journey in trying to unpack all that personally in my own story, which has led to professionally and colleagues and the great conversations I get to have with men that way, but also working with clients. I remember I had one guy show up a couple months ago. It was the most precious thing. And he's like, Bridget, I just want to be a really good man. It's like, absolutely, you do. Of course you do.
See, this is what we need to hear.
Mhm.
And I feel like these stories, Bridget, are hidden in plain sight.
Yes.
It's a bit amazing to me. And I don't know if it's also that phenomenon that you find what you look for,
Mm,
but also I feel like these gems of stories are really, they're all around us. These
yeah.
men that are just like, I want to just be good. I just want to be a good man. But what
Mhm.
seems to get the most spotlight, the most attention is sort of
Mhm.
what we're seeing, on Instagram or on TikTok when it comes to unhealthy masculinity and, all of those sort of narratives that are popping out
Yeah.
and really becoming a divisive thing within our faith circles between men and
Mhm.
women. You said a key word for me that is hitting my narrative right now in real time
Mm,
is the word threat
yes.
and how I've been processing, and I've been doing my work in this space with men and women, but
Yeah.
for my own heart in the last like 6 or 7 years, some previous
Mm,
healing work prior to that in regard to some other trauma, but
yeah.
really wanting to understand polarity, embodiment, the
Mhm.
male, like the masculine, the feminine, all of that within this beautiful, holy context. And, I was looking at some of your influences, which cross over with some of my influences, which is really
Cool.
beautiful. But I was remembering, I was having this conversation with a friend. I feel like in my early 20s and 30s, I was actually pretty decent at holding space for men, and I had some really
Mhm.
healthy men, men of faith, men that loved
Mhm.
God, that were also, as I say, normal. That sounds so mean, but just
Yes.
normal,
No, I
dude.
get that.
I listen.
Hmm.
I mean, we could be weird as women also in the church, and men can be weird in the church as well. But
Yeah.
it's so refreshing when you find some of your people.
Mhm.
And and I remember that being a healing period
Mhm.
for my heart because I grew up
Yeah.
in a Christian school context. Sort of
Mhm.
this division between, boys and girls is really definite. It was very much there, that division and sort of that fear. And if you are going to really be in some sort of connection or friendship, it's got to lead to
Yeah.
marriage or it has all this other weight on it. And I think there's things to consider, right? There's boundaries, all these beautiful things also that we can exercise in those friendships. But what I realized was this sense of like, oh, I'm somehow a threat. And also, men are somehow a threat to my body and to me.
Yes.
And so, the subtext of that
Mhm.
conversation in my particular Christian upbringing, was
Mhm.
this idea of threat. And so, what came up for me, Bridget,
Yeah.
in wanting to get to know this particular guy at at my church, in my circle, who is
Yeah.
attractive. I am attracted to him, but we both sort of safely friend zoned each other.
Yes.
And I think him to me more so than anything, but I was feeling that thing that I felt in high school. You know, it's like I'm
Mm,
far removed from that experience, but it's still in my
mm,
body in certain places where I
yeah.
felt like I was a threat to him
Yeah.
and that he was really trying to uphold these really high boundaries. And I really want to honor men
Yeah.
and women's boundaries. I think those are beautiful.
Absolutely.
But there was something that triggered for me that was like, wait a minute, you're not even wanting to engage in my story. You're wanting to do it within this very, I don't know, like not just safe or over. It was like this kind of the attempt of looking safe, but it felt like fear.
Yeah.
And so I feel like what's something, I also talk to a lot of women and a lot of women of color
Mm,
who in our church context, and a lot of us are in multi generational, multi-ethnic churches or predominantly white churches,
yeah.
where we find often sometimes the men look at us in sort of a novelty way or in a
Wow.
threatened type of way.
Mm,
I'm curious, what's something in our own story? Because again, I don't want to put the the whole weight or the responsibility on these men because I don't,
mhm,
they're going to show up how they want to show up. But for us as women in these spaces, what's been helpful for you as you were walking out of that story of men are a threat? What was
mm,
sort of something that was healing along the journey from college, into dating, coming from that space of like, men and women can't even be friends on Facebook, from your
yeah.
tradition that you came from. Someone
Yeah.
that's listening to this right now can completely relate because they're just like,
Mm,
yeah, absolutely, that makes sense. But I would just invite those that are in
mm,
those spaces, in those communities, to just kind of take a beat and pause and see how that might be affecting your body, the words that you're
mm,
saying, how you're talking about the opposite sex. But I'm curious
yeah.
for you, Bridgett, what helped you sort of walk further into this sort of what I see as this freedom story in
Mm,
your relationship to men and the way in which you communicate with men as
mhm.
well?
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. Loving our conversation. Yeah. A
Yeah.
couple thoughts. I think the first thing, like even paying attention to my body's response to you sharing your story as a woman of color and like how you have had to make sense of what it has meant for men, but white men to not know what to do with your beauty.
Mm. Mm.
Like there are tears that come up in me of like, okay, there's a bigger story here that gets to be honored.
Mm.
And it's okay that like thinking about forgiveness is one of those words that I typically really hate talking about. Because I actually really believe that anger is a really sacred way to forgiveness. Like if you will
Come
follow
on.
anger to
Come
the
on.
end, like she
Yes.
will lead you into, oh wow, I've seen you in your full harm and your full holiness, and I'm okay. Like
Whew.
I'm
Come on.
okay with whatever you've chosen to do. Um, and so I think there's that. There's the like, yes, I want to honor men, and my good body also walks into church and she carries this, will he know how to hold me? Like
Whew.
will he know how to regard me? And if he hasn't done that work, what that costs me to carry.
Mm.
And that's like really okay to name of like
Mm.
every time I go into this space, there is not even just my body, right? You carry your mom's story and your grandmother's
Yes,
story like that,
that's
like
right.
genetically, that's how our bodies work.
That's
And
right.
just to go, oh wow, really painful, really hard.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think how I got from like as I'm just like really, really honest about the pain that I still experience. Like it's not a like, oh my gosh, like all men are safe, all men are wonderful. No, I think
Mm.
the world is full of good and safe men, but that doesn't mean I've known tons of harm by men in my story. I think one of my core values is self-trust, which means I am building a track record with me
Mm.
that I will show up for me.
Oof.
And so that means when something feels funny to me, I
Mm.
go, yeah, I'm not being judgmental. There's actually some alarm bell that's going off that goes, something about this feels funny.
Yes.
Now, it doesn't really matter. People are like, well, Bridgett, what if it's just my trauma? Like, what if it's just my trauma that I'm on this date with this guy, but something feels weird? Okay, well, you figure that out. I call him, well, we'll call it publicly. This happened years ago. I was on a dating app and I was at this point, and this was a couple years ago, I had ended a really serious relationship,
Yeah.
had taken a break. And then I was like, okay, I'm ready to get back out. And I'm just trying to get back out and date. Like, the bar's really low.
Yes.
Not as far as like safety, but the bar as far as low is like, I'm not trying to find my husband. I'm just trying to get back out there.
Yeah.
And so I, chit chatted back and forth. And I was like, okay, he seems okay. And I was the one who initiated coffee. I was like, hey, well, if you want to buy me a coffee, I'd love to continue our conversation.
Yeah.
And that felt fine. And then I started getting like really, really long text messages back, well, hinge messages. We weren't even on text yet, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, ooh, whoa, this is just a whole lot of intensity.
Yes.
And I hadn't even met this man in person. Like, this is just like, these are text messages that I would send my girlfriend when I have like left therapy. And I was like,
Yes.
here's all, like, this was
Yes.
like, ooh, wow, this is a lot.
Yeah.
So instead of, making a judgment or being small, because I think the typical woman response that you're supposed to have as a good Christian woman is like, oh, Bridgett, you're just being judgmental. Like,
Yeah.
he's just nervous. And I was like, So I said, hey, I'm experiencing a little bit of fear in the intensity of these messages. That might mean we have a different expectation of what our coffee date means on Friday or whatever day it was. I'd love to know what's happening on your end so I don't write a story that's not true.
Oof.
That was what I sent. I was just like, hey, I'm getting hit with some fear. This is what's happening for me.
Yes.
To which he sent back like scrolls and scrolls. And I mean, literally I scroll like 3 times. And it was like, you're the one that said, you just wanted a coffee to be casual. You're the one that said you wanted emotional connection. And I was like, he's like, you're not even coming to my town to go on a date with me. You're probably seeing other men. And I was like, oh wow. I said, thank you for clarifying. We obviously have some very different values around communication. I'm no longer interested in going to coffee with you. Best of luck on your journey.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
Now, the pushback I always get is they go, well, Bridgett, what if it is a really good man and you're the one, maybe, right? I leave that weird, painful interaction with man. And then the next date I go on, right? Maybe the next date I go on, my body gets hit with fear again of, oh my gosh, what if this is going to happen to me?
Yeah.
Okay. The best thing that happens when you voice that inner something is you learn, right? I followed it and I fought it. I called a girlfriend. She's like, what's happening for you that you're not just communicating to this man that you feel pain? Like, just ask him what's happening. The worst thing that happens, and I say this kind of in reverse intentionally, the worst thing that happens is there was just a miscommunication and he goes, oh shoot, I'm just so excited to see you. I haven't been on a date in a while. You're so incredible. I actually, we have a friend that goes to the gym together and he said you're amazing. And I just got a little flooded with joy. I will pause. Thank you for communicating. I can't wait to see you on Friday. Yeah. Right. That's the worst thing that happens in that situation. The best thing that happens is you honor it, because what happens? I said, if I wouldn't have said anything about that discomfort I felt, I would have put my body in an unsafe situation with a man that my gut knew wasn't unsafe. Ooh. On the other side, if it was just a miscommunication and the guy was like, oh my gosh, like, thank you for sharing that with me. I want to, and he might not say exactly like that, but something along the lines of like, I'm so glad you shared that with me. Yeah, I missed it. Then my body actually has the space to be open to connection. There it is. Because if I'm carrying this narrative of, is he safe? Is he safe? Is he safe? Is he safe?
That's right.
There's no room for sexy on that date.
No.
I'm in survival mode the whole time.
100%. 100%.
And so I think that, yes, that happened in dating, but like, I think when I even started, I did not even have the confidence to practice it in dating. Like, I was practicing it with my guy friends. And so I had platonic guy friends. I even had a guy that I worked with. And I remember we were having a work meeting one day And typically the way that those meetings were run is he ran the meeting. And it
Okay.
was kind of like, okay, you're my supervisor. I'm able to kind of brain dump. This is what's happening for me.
Mm-hmm.
And because of schedule changes, because of whatever, it kind of started slipping where I started running the meetings. And I just
Mm-hmm.
brought it to him and I was like, ooh, hey, I said, I just need to process some pain. This was actually a place within our company that we designed that I got cared for here. And now that I'm leading the meeting, I don't feel cared for. How can we do this different?
Wow.
And so because I was practicing it in completely platonic situation with no romantic, like it was
Yeah.
just platonic, all this, I would say all the same masculine fears got brought up for me, but it was one step down of like more safety for my body because I took the romance part out of it.
Yes.
And so just
Yeah.
practicing those over and over and over again and really telling, like really, really, really communicating as a certified connection codes coach. One of the things that we really talk about is trying to convey first time, every time, anytime, all the time.
Mm.
That you feel an emotion. And so often we're like, oh my gosh, like I've told my guy friend that I feel fear of being too much 50 times. He's probably sick of me talking about it. Like he's my friend. He's safe for me. But if that's still firing in my body,
Yes.
it's still I have to honor myself to say, "Ooh, I know that you think I'm okay and I know I just still need to communicate still 6 years into
Yes.
our friendship. I still feel like I'm too much sometimes."
Yes.
And he gets to bring containment and safety to that even in a platonic sense. Because again,
Yes.
this is how men are
Yes.
designed for care, designed for connection. Yeah, I have a fun story I'll share a little bit later, but yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking with that.
Oh my goodness. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
I think, whoo, I mean, this is like some real-time nuggets that are just hitting my heart and my
Mm-hmm.
body. Um, some of my audience knows that I'm a certified somatic coach as
Yay.
well. And so I love talking about honoring the body and
Mm-hmm.
sensations that we're feeling. And I love that you mentioned like one of your core values is self-trust and
Yeah.
how it wasn't just, and how it's not just this sort of ethereal or
Mm-hmm.
head knowledge
Yep.
self-trust, but it sounds like, and you let me know if this is correct,
Yeah.
but it sounds like it really is connected to your body and what you sense
Yes.
in your body.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've been told as good Christian girls, or those that
Mm-hmm.
have just become Christian, these women that are
Yes.
coming into this space, you cannot trust your body. You cannot trust your emotions. You cannot trust desire. You're going
Yeah.
to go off of the deep end. All of these
Mm-hmm.
things. Can you maybe share a little bit of how you sort of got led in this journey of really honoring your body, trusting your body, how the Lord is involved in that? And it's not ew, it's not ick, it's not,
Yeah.
what's
Mm-hmm.
that journey maybe been? And it can be all those things. It can be, it can be that too. But yeah, I'd love to know more of that journey for you as well.
Yeah. I think all of the big pastor scandals that we hear about are all rooted in a lack of self-trust. Like, I think if all of these leaders were taught how to trust themselves, I don't think they would have taken the extreme that they did to
Mm.
figure out some level of autonomy.
Okay, Bridget. Hope y'all taking notes.
Right? Because, um, right, there's a difference between having some sort of religious expression and a real relationship with Jesus.
Yes.
Thank the Lord, they're so different. But
Yeah.
religion has to survive somehow as a business. And so if they can teach you, hey, you're uncomfortable, that's not God. You got to listen to me. I'm the leader in charge. Like if you can strip away someone's humanity
Ooh,
to get them to follow your business structure, like you'll make a lot more money, you'll have a lot more people in your seats.
listen.
Right?
Listen, Bridget. Listen, you better talk. You're talking
So
real
it's
good.
like, okay, like, okay, let's acknowledge that.
Yeah.
And let's also honor that human is holy. And that was God's, like, I always say, like, salvation was never about the removal of our humanity. Salvation has always been about our returning to our humanity,
Let's go, Bridget. Mm-hmm.
returning back. Like, that's what Eden is. It's fully present. And so we see that in Jesus too, of like, I One of my favorite stories about Jesus is, I forget where it falls in the Gospels, but I think it shows up in a couple of the books. But John the Baptist, his cousin was just beheaded. So his cousin
Mm,
was just like, think about feeling what that feels like. Oh, if my cousin was just murdered and I have to go do a conference, right? And so there's this moment where he says, I need to go be alone with the Father. You guys go ahead.
yeah.
But paying attention to that time, it's not like there was just another boat showing up. It's not like there was an Uber showing up 15 minutes later when he was done with his prayer session. It was like,
Yeah.
you guys are taking the boat over. There's nothing else here for me. And that's where we have the introduction of the story of Jesus walking on water.
Mhm.
Um, and I think even before that, it's the feeding of the 5,000. So John the Baptist is beheaded. His cousin is murdered.
Yeah.
He feels drawn of like, oh my gosh, I'm so exhausted, but there's
Mhm.
these people and they're here and they're hungry,
Yeah.
and I have to engage them.
Yeah.
Right. We see the Father's heart in Jesus's expression there of like,
Yeah.
oh wow, like, yes, I'm grieving, but you're here and I have to
Yeah.
engage you. But what we don't see is we don't see ministry at the expense of Jesus's humanity. We see him go, oh, actually, I need to go be alone with my dad. Like, I'm really not okay. Like, I'm really not okay. And I need to go be alone with my dad. And so that means I have to send my friends ahead. Um, and then we see this just like tapping into divine resource that goes, I'll just walk there. Like, I know that there's no other boats available, but I'll just walk there. And so I think there's this reclamation journey in my spiritual formation story of coming back to my body
Yes.
that goes, me dialing into my body actually sets me up to be more aware of God, not less. Like, I'm more aware of divine resource. I'm more aware of, oh, that's what's happening for me.
Yes.
Because one of the things I always teach my clients, especially when we're talking about sexual desire, because we can get into all
Yes.
that in a second, is that God designed our bodies to move at the pace of trust.
I love that. Mm.
So if you are disconnected from your body, yes, it's very easy to violate your sexual values because you're dissociated.
Yes.
But if you will actually, and I'm talking about, like, I'm not even talking about a moral sense, I'm just talking about a somatic sense.
Yes.
If you are actually going slow about what's happening in your body, it feels weird. And the reason why I know this works is because, let's just say this. Let's say you walk into a party, right? Um, and you have a, we'll talk about it for men for a second. This is just how you know what trust feels like. You walk into a party and your friend goes, hey, this is my friend Matt. We work together. He's listened to your podcast. And you go, oh, hi, Matt. Great to meet you. And you give Matt a hug, right? You feel okay in that moment, unless you don't. And then that's okay to stick out your hand, right? But maybe you say, you somatically, you feel okay. You give him a hug. That feels great. Now, if Matt was to reach over and grab your butt, you'd be
Mhm.
like, oh, nope, not doing that,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Is that exchange between men and women wrong? No. Is
Mm.
it wrong for this context? Yes, because it
Mhm.
violates trust.
Yeah. Oof. Wow.
So the fact that as I'm telling that story, everyone listening goes, ooh, weird. It's because God designed your body to know what trust feels like. Like, that's just part of how both men and women are designed. And so
Yeah.
if we can slow ourselves down enough and get connected to our body, I really do
Mm.
believe that that sets us up to live more in alignment with our values that honors God, not driving us away. The thing about the separation of body and spirit, I do really think came from an industrialized religious context to serve the business of the church, not
Yeah.
actually the kingdom of the church.
Girl, you better preach out here. You better let us know. Let the people know. I say yes and amen to all of that. You know, as you were talking about Jesus, in the midst of his grief and connecting, and we see in many different spots in the gospel where he's connecting so
Yeah.
deeply with his humanity. And a phrase that I've been sort of mulling over and meditating on is Jesus is showing me the truest way to be human,
Yes.
like the actual way to be human. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
why it was so important for him to be in a human form.
Yes.
Otherwise, God could have just dropped the Holy Spirit and we would have
Yep.
been doing something else here. But there is something about our humanity that is so vital to our spiritual walk, to our movement. I love that you reminded us of that. Also, I think to just the slowing down and paying attention and noticing our bodies, there is such a disconnect and a disassociation that we have, and especially the women that I get to speak with, because for so long, our bodies are like just vilified, and
Mhm.
we're responsible sexually, for the temptation, apparently, for men and women and whoever else, instead of,
Yeah.
really releasing that, surrendering that story and coming back to like, no, actually, I love how you say, and you said this a couple times in this conversation, our good bodies, like
Yes.
our good bodies. And I think you saying that even in this conversation, in this space, I feel like that's
Mhm.
actually a very foreign phrase for people to hear that.
Yes.
Like our good bodies.
Mhm.
Um, what might be like a first step that someone could take to seeing their body, their humanity as good? Like what might be a
Mhm.
first small step that
Mhm.
you might say, or it's coming up for you right now?
Yeah. I would probably get curious about the story. So I would go, where did you learn your body was bad?
Ooh,
Because for most of us, we have a memory of um like I don't know. The thing that comes to mind for me is I was probably middle school, and there was this dress I really loved. It was black on the top, it was tight, and then it had these like blue purple like ruffle things on the bottom.
yes, Ruffles, let's
And
go.
my mom was like, "Oh, that's not very flattering." And I remember I stormed out of the store angry. Like it just felt so violating to me of like, I I don't really care if other like, what are you talking about? The dress is pretty. It brings me joy. Like I don't
Yeah,
really care if people think I'm skinny or not.
yeah.
And it was this first kind of like awareness of like
Mm-hmm.
my body stopped being for me. My body was for the experience of other people. And there's probably other things before then, but when I think about like my body being bad, like immediately, like that's where my brain goes.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for each person, there's probably going to be a story
Yes.
of, um, I'm going to say abuse. Yes, it can be in the traditional way we experience that word. But also, as I've done story work with people, there's also this idea of what's called subtle sexual abuse,
Mm,
where your body wasn't physically violated, but something you leave with the ooh feeling of like, ooh, the
yeah.
way that person looked at me,
Yeah.
the way this was shared, the way that joke was told, it just something
Yes.
about it is
Yeah.
yucky. Or the way my parents talked about their body or talked about my body, like
Yes.
there's just something weird about it. And typically we'll use that phrase like, oh, it's weird, it's funny, this funny thing happened, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, ooh, I can't it, physically it might not classify, but there's still something like that. Like I would just get curious. And I think all of our stories have that somewhere and probably multiple places where
Mm-hmm.
that took place.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
I'm starting to remember some things that, in my own story, as I'm
Mhm.
saying in real time, I'm processing, the
Mhm.
threat that was sort of coming up in my body, the defense that was
Yeah.
coming up in my body in my most recent interaction. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, so that's actually really helpful for me. Would you
Yeah.
mind sharing how you got to become a sexual story coach? What does
Mhm.
that mean? That language is probably new for a lot of people listening to this conversation. Um, I'm here for it all. So yeah, could you
Yeah.
share some more about that with us?
Yeah, I ran away from it for a long for a long time.
Wow.
um so like I said, I grew up in a very traditional church, and so that also included women not being leaders with men and women and not being pastors. And so I got to college and was like, great, I'm going to marry a youth pastor and wear long skirts and have 6 children, and that's going to be my lot in life. And
Yeah.
quickly the Lord had very other plans, which I'm very grateful for. And I began to be in an environment or I remember I was sitting in class one day and the Lord was like, hey, you could do this too, right? I was like, do what? Like, oh, pastor. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, am I allowed to do that? Can I do that?
Yes.
So after college, I pastored for 5 years. I lived in Ohio. I was a spiritual formation pastor at a local church and had a great
Ah,
team
yeah.
there. And when they hired me, like I always knew that was going to be kind of like get my feet wet and figure out kind of what the next step was. And so as I got deeper and deeper into working with people and their stories, the thing that always kind of kept coming up was the sexual thread of like, ooh, I don't have anyone else to talk to. I've never told someone this. As I got more serious about dating, like these conversations became really important to me of how do I do this well that's really fun, that's not violating my values, but it's not like some weird, like I don't want to be weird about this. I
Yeah.
want it to be I want every interaction that I have to be holy and healing for both people. And so what
Yes.
does that really look like? And just began, there were no blueprints.
Yeah.
I think earlier you asked like, well, how do you start to see if TikTok is feeding us men are terrible, how do you counteract that? And to be honest, I just filled my life with good podcasts
Yes.
because I needed to hear like at
Yes.
first for I would say for several years I didn't actually have men in my actual life that were good
Yes.
and safe men.
Yes.
And
Okay.
so I mean, yes, in portions, I'm not going to say that, but I would say at large, the community of men that I was growing up around did not have language for embodiment or emotional health or any of that. So I was
Hmm.
like, okay, well, you know who does? This guy and this guy and this
That's
guy.
right. That's right.
And so had to start listening, like, how do they talk about their wives? How do they talk about sex? How do they talk about their own hearts? Like, what does this sound like? That's not how these guys talk. That's not how, how this, whatever. And so it kind of gave me a worldview for that. And then in 2000, I think 21, I had found this book by Dr. Glenn Hill and his wife Phyllis Hill called The Connection Codes, Blueprint for
Hmm.
Human Connection, all about processing emotions. And I stole it off my coworker's desk and I was like, oh my gosh, I'll buy you a new copy. This is amazing. I've already taken notes in your copy.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yes.
And at first, when they first market, it's changed now that this is about human connection. We can do this to everyone. But when they first started, they were kind of focused more on marriage. And I was like, if we want to stop having marriages that have to learn all this 20 years in when they're ready to get divorced, like
Yeah.
what if we taught people this in singleness so that I just like really, and then
Ooh.
like they had so much work around emotions, but they also have a whole course called Late Night that's all about sexuality. And so I did all this stuff and I
Hmm.
was like, that's really great. But like you can't actually show up safe in sex if you don't show up safe in yourself.
Yes.
Um,
That's right.
and how would that, like, if I had this type of language, like, how different would that be from my very first interactions with a man?
Yeah.
What if I had the skills and he had the skills to communicate what was happening for him emotionally and sexually without it
Yeah.
being weird, without it being
Yeah.
too far, too fast, but
Yeah.
without avoiding the honest conversations of attraction and desire and boundaries and all of those things. Like what would
Yeah.
happen? Like, I think some really cool things would take place.
Yes.
And so a few years ago, like I think I'm like, how long have I been here? I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I've been here for I think 3 years. I
Nice.
can't remember, somewhere
Nice.
along that. And yeah, I kind of jumped into coaching full time. And now this past year I've kind of really rebranded into focusing on the conversation because I kept trying to be like, oh, I tried to call coaching all these other different things, but everything people kept coming back to sexual
Wow.
story stuff. And so this past year, I got certified in being an unwanted guide. So understanding unwanted sexual behavior and
Hmm.
understanding our sexual stories. And that changed my life. I say I hated it and I loved it. It's been the best thing and the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And it was
Yes.
so good just to be with people, right? To be with a group of strangers from all over the world, men and women.
Yeah.
I was the only single person in the group
Yeah.
and which is kind of normal in those types of settings, but just to like really sit with people and go, yeah, these are my earliest, most painful sexual experiences and how they shape my story and how I show up as an adult now. And let's talk about
Yes.
it. And so just
Yeah.
really wanting to, for me, focusing on um, I say my dream client, I work with people in lots of different settings. My dream client is an adult Christian who has history dating, but is kind of in a middle ground right now of like, hey, I know the next time I start dating and the next time I'm in a relationship, I know I want to do different, but I'm kind of curious of like, what does emotional connection look like? What are my actual boundaries? Are they my boundaries? Or are they boundaries that I was told were the right boundaries?
Hmm.
Um, Obviously I work with people in all different ages and stages and that stuff, but
Yeah.
those have been my most fun conversations of like, okay, I have some history here, it ain't working. It
Yeah.
ain't working. And
Yes.
how do we do different going forward? And so it's
Yeah.
been really fun.
Oh my goodness, I love that. Now, as soon as you said that, I felt like someone who's listening is going to be like, okay, I need to like have a session with Bridgett. I need to do a course. I need to, and just so y'all know, I'm going to leave in the show links, everything that you need to get a hold of her, to connect with her. She's got some
Mm,
incredible resources. I feel fully confident on honestly just endorsing the work that you do, Bridgett. I took
thank you.
some time just to research and do a little bit of a deep dive on you. And I was just like, I just kind of, number one, just want to be your best friend. Um,
Please.
number one, just because it's very rare that I find someone aligned in the work that we're doing. Like
Yeah.
you're doing something really beautiful in your space. I'm doing something beautiful, I believe, in my space, but we're
Yes.
like parallel in a lot of ways. And the fact
Mm,
that we also identify, as Christian women or Jesus followers, like
mhm.
that to me is really profound, because I'm just like, this is so rare and beautiful. And this is why I wanted
Yeah.
to get you on the podcast before I closed out this particular season. And we've been talking a lot in these conversations about a lot of things, but
Hmm.
the overriding theme for this particular season was heal, move, like moving your body
Yes.
and being able to dream. And I feel like this conversation you and I have been having kind of hits, honestly,
Mm,
almost all of those things. But I'm really curious now
yeah.
that I said move, there's two things I want to bring up. And I'm just
Yeah.
curious about, like, do you get to move your body? Is that helpful? And where does desire fit into all this? I have a lot of folks that are single,
Hmm.
that are listening to this conversation and are wanting to honor their values, as
Hmm.
a Jesus follower. But I'm curious, in your experience, moving your body, and I'm big on
Yeah.
that. Folks that,
Yeah.
are familiar with me, they see me line dance and all of those things. And but
Hmm.
it's just a way to be very present for me and my body. For some people,
Yeah.
it's a walk, a hike, but that also connects me to my humanity,
Mm, yeah.
helping me to remember, like, oh, this is a
Hmm.
good body. Do you
Yeah.
have any practices in movement for yourself? Just curious, and then would love to hear about desire on the back end of that.
Yeah. I love that. For me, movement has been a really wounded place in my story. I had brain surgery when I was 14. And so I have dealt with some pretty significant health issues for a really long time.
Mm.
And so I'm in right now in body care places of doing acupuncture and chiropractic care, which has
Yes.
been fantastic. And so I was at a place where we're like, I did a bunch of hormone testing. We realized some things were out of whack. I needed support. And so she was like, okay, like let's just do walking. So I love to walk. That's always been my baseline. But I just took a trip and I came back, and travel is always, I feel shame about the intensity of how much travel takes out of my physical capacity. And so I told her, I just was like, ooh, wow, like this week, like even just doing more than my normal little loop is a lot. And so it's just this tender place for me over the years of like, there's been seasons when I love doing like, I still have the DVDs of them.
Yes,
Those are my
DVDs.
favorite.
Let's go.
The Leslie Sansone walk at home videos with like the weight training and stuff. Oh
Let,
my gosh.
let me link to those in the show notes.
Oh
Somebody's
my
like,
gosh.
I
Love
want
them
it.
so much.
Let's go.
Um, but I'm in a place right now where my body says, please don't, please don't.
Yes.
And so I need to listen to her in that. So it's tender for me. I'm just a big walk person. That feels really good. My best friend and I, we try to walk together most mornings. We do at least 30 minutes where we're on the phone together going for a walk, which has been really
Mm.
fun. But with that, I know a couple things come to mind. I, so a couple of the language that's really important to me when we're talking about sexual desire. This actually comes from, I think, Esther Perel, maybe the Gottmans. I think it's kind of sprinkled around in
Mhm.
those circles about identifying sexual joy and sexual loneliness.
Ooh.
So the way that I describe what they feel like in your body is sexual joy is a pushing force
Hmm.
that moves me towards pleasure, delight, and play.
Mm. Wow.
And sexual loneliness is a pulling force that calls on my need to be seen and cared for. So, sexual joy, pushing force, moves me towards pleasure, delight, and play. Sexual loneliness is a pulling force that reminds me of my need to be seen and cared for.
Mm.
Um, so this was, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago. It was Sunday morning. I woke up and I was just flooded with sexual loneliness of like, oh gosh, like I just feel so desperate to be cared for.
Yeah.
This is really lonely. This feels really hard. Blah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Blah.
Yes. Yes.
And so I was like, okay, how do I be really intentional to care for myself today?
Ooh.
Because there are 100 different ways that I could use that pull of sexual loneliness to get a man to pay attention to me
Yep.
just for a quick fix of like,
Yeah.
okay, great.
Sure.
So I said, okay, you know what I need? So my church rents a building. So they have plastic chairs and they're horrible. They're horrible. So I have a like a tailbone pillow that I keep in the car
Yes,
to
ma'am.
help my body and help my spine. And so I'm like, you know
Yes.
what? I'm bringing that thing to church.
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
sitting on it. I said, you know what else? I'm not going to be early to church. I'm going to stop and I'm going to get gas because tomorrow I have a meeting really early. And if I don't get gas now, that'll mess me up for tomorrow.
That's
And
right.
I have the right to go slow. And that's okay. I need to be seen. I need to be cared for. And I'm spiraling a little bit. So I just need to take care of myself. And so it was like, okay, how today, in the midst of my sexual loneliness, and that for me, it's different. Sexual loneliness is different than just being lonely. Like sexual loneliness is
Yes,
the
exactly.
deep feminine. Well, I think it can be masculine too, but the deep sensual embodied need of human touch and togetherness.
Yes.
And so that doesn't always mean about sexual activity. I think that's where most people get it wrong is they think even yeah, we'll go there. I think a lot of people think that if I'm just more sexually active, I'll be more sexually connected to myself and
Yeah.
to other people.
Yes.
But that actually doesn't happen if we don't learn to connect with ourselves first in identifying the need so that
Oof.
when we are engaging in sexual or sensual, right, experiences, it's not because I'm desperate and I need another human to fill my sexual joy, sexual loneliness tank. It's actually saying, I have resource inside myself. You have resource inside of you. And we're actually showing up to share together at a pace that
Wow.
aligns with our trust and aligns with our commitment.
Wow.
And then we actually leave full and fed, not like
Wow.
devoured.
Yes.
And so as far as how desire goes is I like literally in that moment of bringing that pillow into church, which people made comments about, which I felt shame about
Mm-hmm.
because it's like this massive thing where I'm like carrying out my big water cup, not my
Mm-hmm.
bag and all things. But I'm like, no, like I have to practice
Yes.
in my own body showing up, which says, I'm drowning today. I need to be cared for. I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm feeling on edge so that
Mm.
in places and spaces where I'm engaging with a hot and holy man in the way that my body needs to be cared for, I can communicate. This is where I am. This is what I need. And this is what I'd like to share with you. But if I don't practice that in myself in non sexual context, I'm not going to have the skills to do that in a sexual context. So much of the work I do with clients is not even about sexual experiences or dating or whatever. It's about, are you safe for you? Because if you're safe for you, then you can build safety with another human.
Yes. Shout out to all my beautiful connection method girls, the girls that I've coached for the last 4 years. This is you're speaking our language, Bridgett. You're speaking our language. And for those that have never heard this, I hope this is starting to set you free or make you curious.
Yes.
That is so powerful, Bridgett. Like, again, I'm just reminded of what you shared with us earlier, of one of your core values, of self-trust and listening to your body, listening and allowing yourself to care for yourself in the ways that it needed. But you've shown up for yourself in listening to podcasts and getting language and sharing and growing and experimenting in this sort of journey to see like, okay, like what is feeling safe and good for my good body.
Yeah.
I love how you said the right to go slow. Um, And I'm just reminded of the invitation that I have in these last, especially in these last few months, where
Mm-hmm.
I felt like the Lord for me was just like, there's just two things you need to really do, and everything else will kind of
Yeah.
fall into place. Patrice, be honest and go
Mm-hmm.
slow.
Yes.
Be honest and go slow.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the reasons why I wanted to do my podcast and do these conversations, because I wanted to have honest
Mm-hmm.
conversations.
Yeah.
Some of us are having them, right, with our girlfriends or our guy
Yeah.
friends, but majority, Bridgett, what I'm sensing and what I'm hearing, they are not.
Yeah.
And folks are really thirsty for these types of conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Also, thank you for sharing a really beautiful definition of, um, and can you give me that term again, like the pushing and the pull, like sexual
Yeah.
loneliness versus sexual
Sexual
joy?
joy. Yeah.
Yeah. And that sexual joy is a pushing. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Sexual joy is pushing towards pleasure, delight, and play.
Yeah. And sexual loneliness is a pulling,
Mm-hmm.
where you have this need to be seen and cared for. I think just
Mm-hmm.
having that really beautiful language, it
Yeah.
already positions my body to be kind to itself, hearing
Yes.
that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe that we are almost out of time in this conversation. Like
Mm,
I would love to have you back on
yeah.
this podcast, because I know I'm going to get more questions from our conversation
Great.
because this is just so juicy and so good.
Mm,
Um, I just have two more questions before we close out.
love it.
And we've been talking a little bit about core values,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that's sort of resonating right now for me, is remembering like what is my core value, or my top three or top five, however people want to, sort of distill,
Mm-hmm.
those important things. But how were you able to identify
Mm-hmm.
your core value? And I know it may take some work with, someone else as well, but what might be possible for someone who's listening who wants to start to tap into a core value that they can really honor starting
Mm,
today, or honor this week, and
yeah.
continue that journey?
Mm, yeah. I always feel guilt when I get asked this question because I actually feel like I'm not the person for this question. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm the person once we've solved this question.
Yes. Yeah.
But a couple of things come to mind. Number one, Brene Brown has a really great resource. It's a core values sheet that I will use with people. One of the tools that was really helpful for me a couple of years ago, I worked with a matchmaker. And one of the things that she had us do was write out our vision statement for dating.
Yeah.
And so, an example of, it doesn't have to be exactly this, but my dating statement is I will build connections that value authenticity, discovery, and compassion that results in hope, fun, and restoration for both people.
Okay. I mean, I don't even need to be out here dating. If I don't have a line like that, all of us are just like, reverse, reverse, reverse. I don't need to. I mean,
So that followed a blueprint that she gave me. It was
let's
a
go.
I will build a blank um that results I will what is it? I will build a blank, whatever it is. So we're saying a dating relationship that values blank that results in blank. So that's when I phoned a friend, Brene Brown, and said, give me a list of, and that's kind of, you listen, you go through a list of whatever, 100, and just circle. What are the ones that stick out to me? What are the ones where I feel drawn to? And then just kind of keep whittling them down of like, okay, here's my top two. Here's my top one. Like, I think just kind of going slow with that space
Yes.
would probably be where I would start with that. Um, I think again, there's something instinctual inside of you and the way that we're designed that you gravitate towards certain things, right? Like if someone was to say competition is their core value and like friendly competition, I would go, not me, not me, could care less, could care less, right? But that doesn't mean that it's not important and holy in work in their life. That's just not me because I feel my body response. If you were to say, um, integrity, right? I go, ooh, yum. I lean in. It feels yummy in my body to hear that word. Um, so I would go with what feels good, what feels like you can't live without. And there's a bunch of other people. Like if you look up resources that are like core values or whatever, I'm not that girl. I'm step two.
Listen, you keep saying you're not that girl, and you just gave us like two of the best examples. And funny enough, I actually have a core values list that is a free PDF that I'm going to link to
Amazing.
in this conversation. So if y'all want to get some ideas of what might resonate for you and your core values, just look at the show links. And you
That's
can
so
get
good.
that free PDF for yourself and start that discovery. There, this conversation, Bridget, I can't like, yeah, I have so many church notes, as I call it, on this conversation, like so many church notes. The last question I ask in the main conversation, and if it's okay with you, I'd love to just keep you for another 5, 7 minutes to do a private
Yeah,
conversation for my Patreon space.
cool.
But for this big main conversation, the last question, when I remember to ask it, um, is what's on your playlist? Because I'm a sensual person. And when I say sensual, most people think of sex right away. I
Yeah,
used to. I was just like, when someone
yeah.
says, I had a mentor tell me, like, you are, and she's a woman that I greatly admire. She's like,
Mm,
you are, I've always known. She's known me since I was 19. She's like,
yeah.
I've always known that you are very sensual. And it was
Hmm.
like, oh, I love senses, like the
Yes.
senses. I love what things smell like, taste like, feel like on my skin.
Hmm.
I savor. That's just been sort of my,
Yes.
my jam. And so when I invite people to share what's on their playlist, it's very sensory joyful for me
Hmm.
to hear and to discover and to share that with the folks that are listening to this
Yeah.
conversation. So maybe what's one or two songs, if any, that are on your playlist right now?
Yeah. In this kind of theme of uh, building a worldview of the goodness of men, part of that has been through music. And so for
Mm,
me, I'm really intentional. Two of my favorite artists are Russell Dickerson. Everybody knows this.
let's go.
Russell Dickerson and Jake Scott, which I got to see them in concert here in Nashville a couple months ago, and it was the best experience of my life. But what was amazing about that room is because the authority, right? We can get a little churchy here,
Let's do
because
it.
the authority in that room were two good and safe men. I walked into that arena being like, oh, it's a country concert with people drinking. I'm probably gonna feel unsafe at some point in this concert. Like I just go in, right? That's my embodied experience of the world as a woman. And it was so safe. It felt so good. Um, yeah, I feel really protective when I'm listening to music of the sexual scripts that I'm listening to.
Yes.
And so if
Yes.
something in my body feels yucky, of like, I don't like the way he's talking about sex. This feels yucky to me. I
Yeah.
don't listen to it. I grieve it because typically I usually have to do a lot of grief because typically the song is really good. Like
Yeah.
it's really musically talented. It's really
Yeah.
beautiful. But it's not a script that I want to train my body to be aroused by. But that means I'm really intentional to have really good music. My favorite song right now is called Sure Ain't by Wilder Woods, and it is yummy. It is spicy and yummy. Um, and it feels really good. But yeah, I think for me in playlist right now, summer fun is just being really intentional of like what are the sexual scripts that I'm listening to in my music, and where do I get to have power back to say, you know what, this song, even though it's really popular, nah, not for me. These songs, my body feels safe. I feel welcomed into a more safe and secure and honoring sexual experience, and I want my brain to listen to those ones too.
I mean, not that I was like blaring Blue Tacoma by Russell Dickerson like all last week.
Yes.
Not you mentioning one of my favorite folks as well. I love that. We love all genres here, especially country, because I country line dance a ton as
Yes.
well. So that's just super sweet. Bridget, as we finish this big conversation, the main conversation, is there any sort of last thing you'd like to share? Any maybe word of encouragement for our singles
Mm,
that are listening to this conversation?
yeah. Um, you're you're worth engaging your sexual story for you. Like it's not for a spouse, it's not for becoming the best leader. Like sure, those are all great like consequences or rewards for doing the work, but like you're worth being sexually connected to you, just for your story. Um, and again, for me, I really stress it like that you can do all of that without violating any of your personal ethics or beliefs around sexual activity. Um, and you're worth that. Like you're really, really worth unpacking your story and having a better conversation about desire.
A better conversation about
Mm-hmm.
desire.
Mm-hmm.
Bridgett, we already love you.
Mm,
We already love you so much. Thank you for taking the time out of your full and beautiful life, to sit
mm.
down with me and to share. Um, I'm going to definitely be getting some more of your resources. I'm going to try and download some things. Probably have you coach me as we get towards the winter. What do they
Love
call
it.
it?
Come on,
Yeah,
cupping season.
cuffing season. You're about to get an email, girl. Um, but yeah, thank you again so much. And so, bye everyone. And if you're in Patreon, if you're one of my little Patreon babes, you're going to get a bonus conversation with Bridgett and I. So we'll see you over there. But for everyone else, love you so much and bye for now.
Mm.
I mean, how are you feeling after that conversation? I just want to give you a moment just to kind of take that in. Well done also for making it to the end of that conversation because there was a lot of different things that might have come up for you. But I'm so glad that you were here and that you heard this. If you're in my Patreon space, feel free to drop any questions that you might have for me or for Bridgett around some of the topics or any of the topics that you're more curious about. I'd love to give you more resources. As I mentioned in the main conversation, you can check the show links. So wherever you're watching this, usually on Spotify or YouTube, or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, there's a section when you look at the episode description, where you can actually see the links that I wanted to share with you. Links from myself, like my core value PDF, that's free. And you can get an idea of starting to see what is a core value that really resonates for you. And a lot of the beautiful links to get connected to the work that Bridgett does. And please go and show her some love on the socials, on Instagram. Sign up for her email list. There's a fun announcement that she shares in our Patreon space. So if you're a Patreon paid member at my Patrice's Bloom table, there's some exciting things that she's working on. And there's a bonus conversation. She and I talk for, gosh, another 20, 30 minutes, and she shares something she calls the core four. I'm just going to tease that out right there, the core four. So if you are in my Patreon space, you're going to get to know what that is and how she is seeing success with her coaching clients with this framework of the core four. So yeah, just get that if you're in Patreon. And if you're not yet a Patreon member, you can join now. You can download the app. You can access it through your iPad or your phone, your laptop, what have you. Again, I want to give you things that really add to your life and resource you, not drain you. That's why I share these unique conversations outside of social media and the big conversation, because I want to really maintain a safe space with little and minimal distractions, and then a space where I can answer your questions and pray with you through some of the things that you are journeying through right now. So a takeaway that I am thinking of right now from that conversation. Wow. How our bodies tell our story. Wow. I'm just kind of sitting with that amid a lot of other things, like reconnecting to my core value, which for me, one of my core values is freedom and being able to feel free and spacious in my own body with me. That's why I love to dance the way that I dance. But also it's important that I cultivate that in relationship and friendships with men in healthy ways, and with women in platonic, beautiful ways where I want to feel free and spacious. And so I'm going to be doing some work on my own and just kind of sitting with the Lord, going slow, staying honest and going slow, um, as I take this conversation in. So I'd love for you to join Bridgett and I over on Patreon. If you are a lady, because that space is for my ladies, she has some nuggets that she shares for married women, and also for single women when it comes to sexual desire, and for the married women experiencing more sexual joy. And yeah, we're talking about women of faith here. Listen, I love these conversations with you. Can you do me a favor? Can you let me know how this conversation impacted you, if it was meaningful? If it was, can you leave a review wherever you listen to this? Or can you leave me a comment or a DM so I can share it on my channels or share it with others? It just helps to get conversations like this out to more hearts and minds that need to hear these types of conversation. This is the end of this season, season 4. I was like, what season am I in? And there will be another season. There's going to be a next season. And I asked Bridgett if she'd come back. I think she might be our resident sexual story coach here on the podcast, if she's open to that. But I'm excited for what I'm cooking up for y'all for the next season, the guests that will be coming, the topics that we're going to be exploring. And yeah, again, all for the purpose of being inspired, right? But also learning how to really live fully human as we are pursuing God and serving and loving and doing all the things that we do. Thank you for journeying with me, for listening to Patrice's playlist. You can find me at Together Good Co. pretty much on, I was going to say, in all the social media channels. Not really, mostly Instagram, sometimes Facebook. But really, I encourage you to sign up for my email list if you're not ready to commit to the Patreon space, which is fine. But my email list, I keep you updated of when things are coming and new offerings and things to hopefully bless you and resource your life. Well, I will see you later. I hope that you have an incredible, if you're in summer or if you're in winter, if you're in fall or you're in spring, I hope that it's a beautiful season for you. And yeah, I pray that you really get a chance to be honest with God, with yourself, and to slow down and know that you are made with a good, beautiful body for a good purpose. And God's got good things in store for you, and you are so deeply and richly loved. Until the next time, bye for now.